I am Aidan, a 35-year-old financial analyst with what I thought was a perfect 8-year marriage to Jessica. Everything seemed fine until I noticed the secretive phone calls, password changes on her devices, and meetings with people I had never heard of. The final red flag came when I discovered a business card for a high-profile divorce attorney tucked inside her purse. That is when I knew I needed to protect myself from whatever she was planning behind my back. Before I tell you how I uncovered my wife's secret plan and what happened when she realized her divorce strategy had completely backfired, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from. And subscribe if you have ever had to. Protect yourself from someone you once trusted. I met Jessica at a charity gala in downtown Chicago 10 years ago. She commanded attention the moment she entered the room, not just because of her beauty, but because of the confident way she carried herself. As a corporate attorney for one of the largest firms in the city, she had a sharp intelligence that I found irresistible. We talked for hours that night, neglecting the actual charity auction we were both supposedly there to support. Our romance moved quickly. Within 6 months, we were practically living together, and by our 2-year anniversary, I had proposed. The wedding was everything Jessica had dreamed of: a lavish affair at a historic mansion with 200 guests, a 5-course dinner, and dancing until the early morning hours. Looking back now, I can see how much she valued appearances and status, but at the time I was simply happy to give her the wedding she wanted. The early years of our marriage were good, or at least I thought they were. We purchased a beautiful 4-bedroom home in an upscale suburb, focused on our careers, and discussed having children once we felt financially secure enough. My career in financial analysis was taking off, and Jessica had just made junior partner at her law firm. From the outside, we looked like the perfect power couple. The first signs of trouble were subtle. Jessica began working later than usual, often not coming home until after I had gone to bed. She became increasingly protective of her phone, taking it with her everywhere, even to the bathroom. If I entered a room while she was on a call, she would quickly end the conversation or switch to talking about something innocuous. Then I began to notice changes in our finances. Small withdrawals from our joint account that Jessica could not clearly explain. $300 here, $500 there. When I asked about them, she would wave them off as work expenses she would be reimbursed for, or gifts for family members. I trusted her, so I did not push the issue, but the pattern bothered me. More concerning was her sudden interest in our investment accounts and retirement funds. Jessica had always been content to let me handle the financial planning, given my expertise in the field, but she started asking detailed questions about account balances, beneficiaries, and how quickly we could liquidate certain investments, if needed. The real alarm bell rang when I overheard her on the phone in our home office late one night. I had come downstairs for a glass of water and paused outside the office door when I heard her say, "I just want to make sure I get what I deserve from this. He has no idea what is coming." My stomach dropped. Who was she talking to? What was coming that I had no idea about? I quietly returned upstairs, my mind racing with possibilities, none of them good. Over the next few weeks, Jessica began asking pointed questions about my recent promotion and the bonus structure that came with it. She knew I was scheduled to receive a substantial performance bonus at the end of the quarter, and she seemed particularly interested in the exact amount and when it would be deposited. "We should really consider changing our banking arrangements," she suggested one evening over dinner. "It would simplify things if we consolidated everything." This was a complete reversal from her previous position. For years, Jessica had insisted on maintaining some financial independence with her own accounts alongside our joint ones. Now suddenly she wanted everything together. It did not make sense. Then came her push to renovate our already beautiful home. "The kitchen needs updating if we ever want to sell," she insisted, "and the master bathroom is so outdated." These renovations would cost well into the 6 figures, and we had previously agreed to prioritize saving for a few more years before taking on such projects. The weekend Jessica claimed to be visiting her sister in Milwaukee was when my suspicions crystallized into something more concrete. I happened to check her sister's Instagram, and to my surprise, there were photos of her at a beach house with friends, clearly not hosting Jessica. When my wife returned Sunday night and shared stories about her sister's new boyfriend and their dinner together, I knew she was lying to me. But about what and why, my anxiety grew to the point where I could barely sleep. I would lie awake next to Jessica, listening to her steady breathing, wondering if our entire marriage had been a lie. Should I confront her? What if I was overreacting and there was an innocent explanation, but the knot in my stomach told me something was very wrong and I needed to tread carefully? I decided that before confronting Jessica, I needed more information. If she was planning something that could harm me, I needed to protect myself. But I would have to be careful and methodical in my investigation, not alerting her to my growing suspicions. Little did I know just how right my instincts would prove to be. I began my investigation by reviewing our credit card statements from the past 6 months. Jessica had her own card on our joint account, and I noticed several charges at expensive restaurants on days she had told me she was working late. There were also charges for a hotel downtown just 15 minutes from her office. Why would she need a hotel room in the same city where we lived? Next, I checked our phone records. There was a number that appeared repeatedly often with calls lasting 30 minutes or more. These calls typically happened during her working late nights or during her lunch breaks. I did a reverse lookup on the number and discovered it belonged to a law office but not her firm. The real breakthrough came when Jessica asked me to grab her car keys from her purse while she was finishing getting ready for dinner. As I reached in, my fingers brushed against a thick, textured business card. Normally, I would have thought nothing of it, but something made me pull it out and look at it. Kathleen Donovan, family law attorney. The card read, specializing in high-asset divorce cases. My blood ran cold. I quickly returned the card to her purse and found the keys, trying to compose myself before Jessica came downstairs. That night at dinner, I watched my wife laugh and talk about her day as if everything was normal while I felt like I was sitting across from a stranger. How long had she been planning this? Was anything about our relationship real anymore? The next day, I took a long lunch break and researched Kathleen Donovan online. Her website proudly proclaimed her expertise in representing clients in divorces where one spouse significantly out-earned the other. She had testimonials from clients praising her ability to secure favorable settlements and uncover hidden assets. The implications were unmistakable. I needed advice from someone who had been through this before. I reached out to my college friend Marcus, who had gone through a nasty divorce 3 years earlier. We met at a bar far from my usual haunts where there was little chance of running into anyone who knew Jessica. She blindsided me completely, Marcus confided after I explained my suspicions. For months, Jennifer was gathering information, documenting everything, building her case. She encouraged me to work more, take on additional responsibilities, while she quietly prepared to argue that I was an absent husband. The parallels to my situation were disturbing. Jessica had been supportive of my recent 60 to 70-hour work weeks to secure my promotion, even though it meant less time together. She had also begun documenting issues with our house, taking photos of minor problems and keeping a list of needed repairs, despite never being interested in home maintenance before. Check your computer, Marcus advised. Jennifer kept everything in a hidden folder on our shared laptop. That night, while Jessica was at a client dinner, I searched our home computer. In a subfolder buried within her work documents was a folder simply labeled PD for project documentation, a term she used for her legal cases. Inside, I found screenshots of all our financial accounts, including my personal retirement fund and the inheritance I had received after my grandmother passed away last year. My hands shook as I opened a draft email to Kathleen Donovan discussing optimal timing for filing. The email mentioned waiting until after my annual bonus was deposited, as it would significantly increase the marital assets subject to division. I felt physically ill. The final confirmation came when I discovered Jessica's handwritten notes calculating potential settlements under different scenarios. She had estimated the value of our home investments, retirement accounts, even my expected future earnings. She had circled figures and written comments like minimum acceptable and target amount. My wife was not just considering a divorce, she was strategizing how to extract the maximum financial benefit from ending our marriage. I closed the files and cleared the browser history, then went upstairs and poured myself a drink with trembling hands. The betrayal cut deep. While I had been planning our future together, Jessica had been plotting her exit, seeing me not as her partner, but as a financial asset to be liquidated at the most profitable moment. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in years and scheduled an emergency appointment with a divorce attorney of my own. I needed to understand my options and rights before Jessica put her plan into motion. "Unfortunately, this is not uncommon," said Robert Shepard, the attorney I consulted. "From what you have described, your wife is preparing for what we call a strategic divorce. She is timing the filing to maximize her financial benefit." "What can I do?" I asked, feeling helpless. "Can I hide our assets to protect them?" "Absolutely not," Robert said firmly. "Hiding assets is illegal and will backfire spectacularly in court. However, there are legitimate ways to reorganize your finances before a divorce filing that are completely legal." He explained that while I could not conceal assets, I could take steps to properly identify what was marital property versus separate property. My recent inheritance, for instance, could potentially be protected if it had not been commingled with our joint funds. The same applied to portions of my retirement that predated our marriage. "Document everything," he advised. "And start considering what your priorities are in a settlement. The more prepared you are, the better position you will be in when she files." I left his office with a clear action plan and the business card of a forensic accountant who specialized in divorce cases. For the first time since finding that divorce attorney's card, I felt a glimmer of control returning. Jessica was not the only one who could be strategic. Over the next week, I implemented the advice from my attorney with calculated precision. First, I opened new accounts at a different bank to properly segregate my inheritance from my grandmother. This was money that had come to me after her death last year, and since I had not yet combined it with our marital assets, my attorney assured me it could likely be protected as separate property. I gathered documentation proving the source of the funds for our house down payment. We had purchased our home a year after getting married, but I had contributed 80% of the down payment from savings I had accumulated before we Wednesday. This could be important in establishing my separate interest in what was otherwise our largest marital asset. I accelerated the repayment of my student loans using a portion of my recent bonus to eliminate this debt entirely. While this reduced the cash available, it also reduced our marital liabilities and protected some of my income from future claims. Next, I methodically photographed and cataloged every item in our home, noting which items I had brought into the marriage and which we had purchased together. I found receipts for the more valuable items and created a spreadsheet documenting their approximate current values. All of this had to be done while maintaining absolute normalcy around Jessica. I went to work, came home at my usual time, and engaged in our regular routines. When she asked about my day, I shared the same level of detail I always had. When she suggested weekend plans, I agreed enthusiastically. I became the actor in a performance where my marriage was the stage and the stakes could not have been higher. Jessica, meanwhile, seemed increasingly interested in my work schedule and whereabouts. She would text me throughout the day asking where I was having lunch or when I would be home. She began checking our mail before I could see it, and I noticed her scanning my desk when she thought I was not looking. One evening over dinner, she casually brought up my upcoming bonus again. "So the deposit should be coming through next Friday, right?" she asked, sipping her wine. "Actually, there has been a change in the payment structure," I lied smoothly. "The company is staggering bonus payments this quarter due to some cash flow issues. Mine might be delayed a few weeks." I watched her face carefully and caught the momentary flash of disappointment before she composed herself. "Oh, that is frustrating. Did they give you a specific date?" "Not yet," I replied. "Finance is still working out the details." This small deception bought me precious time. My bonus had indeed been deposited that very morning, but into my new separate account, not our joint one. It was a calculated risk, but one my attorney had assured me was legal, as long as I fully disclosed it when required during divorce proceedings. Working with the forensic accountant, I uncovered several concerning transactions Jessica had made over the past few months. Small withdrawals had accumulated to nearly $20,000 that she had moved to an account I knew nothing about. I documented these transfers carefully but said nothing to her. Each piece of evidence strengthened my position for what I knew was coming. The most difficult part was managing my emotions during this time. At night, lying next to the woman who was secretly planning to leave me, I cycled through grief, anger, betrayal, and fear. There were moments I wanted to confront her, to ask how she could plot so coldly against someone she had once promised to love forever. But I kept silent, focusing instead on protection rather than confrontation. My attorney advised me to move a significant portion of my recent bonus and inheritance to accounts that were clearly in my name, only with documentation showing the source of these funds. This was not to hide the money, but to properly categorize it as separate property rather than marital assets. I followed his advice to the letter, ensuring every move was documented, legitimate, and defensible in court. This 2-week period was perhaps the most stressful of my entire life. I maintained my normal schedule while secretly preparing for the dissolution of my marriage. I smiled across the breakfast table at Jessica while knowing she was counting down the days until she could file for divorce and claim half of everything I had worked for, possibly more. I prepared myself mentally for the confrontation I knew was imminent. Jessica would file soon, expecting to catch me off guard, expecting me to be emotional and make mistakes. But thanks to my preparations and the guidance of my attorney, I would be ready. The moment finally arrived on a Tuesday morning. I had just returned from an early gym session when Jessica met me in the kitchen, her expression serious but with a hint of something that looked almost like triumph in her eyes. "We need to talk, Aidan," she said, placing a manila envelope on the counter between us. I knew exactly what was inside, but I feigned confusion as I opened it and removed the divorce petition. I skimmed the document, which cited irreconcilable differences as the reason for our marriage breakdown. "I am sorry it has come to this," Jessica said, her voice practiced and even. "I have tried to make this work, but I think we both know we have grown apart." I looked up at her, struck by her performance. There was no emotion in her eyes, just calculation. I wondered briefly if she had rehearsed this moment, planned exactly what she would say, and how she would appear appropriately regretful, yet resolved. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked quietly. She flinched slightly, the first genuine reaction I had seen. "This is not about planning, Aidan. This is about accepting that our marriage is not working." I nodded slowly. "I understand. I will have my attorney review these papers and respond accordingly." Now it was her turn to look confused. She had clearly expected shock, pleading perhaps tears. My calm acceptance threw her off balance. "You already have an attorney?" she asked. "I do now," I replied, simply turning to pour myself a cup of coffee, as if we were discussing something as mundane as the weather. 2 days later, I received a formal request for emergency financial disclosures from Jessica's attorney, Kathleen Donovan. The aggressive timeline suggested they were concerned about assets being moved. If only they knew they were already several steps behind. My attorney responded promptly, providing comprehensive documentation of all accounts along with clear paper trails showing the source of funds for my separate property claims. We included records of Jessica's unexplained withdrawals and the secret account she had established. A week after she served me the divorce papers, we met with both attorneys present for an initial discussion of asset division. I will never forget the look on Jessica's face when my attorney methodically presented documentation of every financial move I had made, all legitimate, all traceable, all completed before she had filed. "What is this?" she hissed during a break, cornering me in the hallway outside the conference room. "Where is the money from your bonus? And the inheritance?" "It is all accounted for," I replied calmly. "Everything is documented and has been properly disclosed to your attorney." "You knew," she said, realization dawning in her eyes. "You knew I was going to file. I suspected." I corrected her. "When someone spends months planning a strategic divorce, they often leave clues." Her face flushed with anger. "You had no right to move that money. Actually, I had every right to properly categorize my separate property before you filed Jessica. Perhaps you should have filed sooner if you wanted to claim my bonus and inheritance." That evening, I received a flurry of text messages from her, alternating between accusations and attempts at reconciliation. Maybe we acted too hastily, one message read. We should consider marriage counseling before making any permanent decisions. I did not respond. The next day, her attorney contacted mine with a surprising suggestion that we attempt mediation rather than proceeding with litigation. The aggressive stance they had initially taken was noticeably absent. During our first mediation session, Jessica attempted a new strategy, claiming she had only been exploring her options and never seriously intended to file for divorce. She suggested that my financial movements had created the rift between us, not her secret planning. My attorney silently slid across the table copies of her emails to Kathleen Donovan discussing optimal timing for the divorce filing. We also presented her handwritten notes, calculating various settlement scenarios based on the timing of my bonus. These were obtained legally from our shared home computer and office, my attorney explained to the mediator. My client discovered them while using the computer for household matters. Jessica's face drained of color as she realized her careful planning had been exposed. Her attorney whispered something to her and she nodded stiffly. From that point, the negotiations proceeded much differently than Jessica had likely envisioned. Instead of extracting a maximum settlement from an unprepared spouse, she found herself on the defensive, explaining her secret account and undocumented withdrawals. In a last desperate move, Jessica reached out to several of our friends, painting me as controlling and financially abusive. She claimed I had hidden assets and manipulated her. Two couples we had been close with for years called me concerned about these allegations. I calmly explained the situation, showing them the documentation of Jessica's planning and the legal steps I had taken to protect myself. Their shock quickly turned to support when they understood the full picture. 4 months after Jessica filed for divorce, we reached a settlement. She received a fair portion of our marital assets as required by law, but her attempts to claim my inheritance and bonus as marital property were unsuccessful. The judge noted that my financial moves had been made before filing, were properly documented, and appeared to be legitimate estate planning rather than attempts to hide assets. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I had rebuilt my life in meaningful ways. I sold our house and purchased a smaller but more modern condo downtown closer to my office. I reconnected with friends I had neglected during my marriage, and even started dating again, this time more carefully. I was having dinner at a new restaurant when I spotted Jessica at a corner table dining alone. Our eyes met briefly, and after a moment's hesitation, she approached my table. "You look well," she said, searching my face. "Thank you." "So do you," I replied politely. She glanced down, then back at me. "I underestimated you, Aidan. I thought I had calculated everything perfectly." "That was your mistake," I said quietly. "You saw me as a financial asset, not a person. You calculated what I was worth to you in dollars, not in love or loyalty." She nodded slightly, accepting the truth in my words. "For what it is worth, I am sorry." "I hope you find what you are looking for, Jessica," I said, meaning it despite everything. "Goodbye." As she walked away, I realized that the pain had finally subsided. The betrayal would always be part of my story, but it no longer defined me. I had protected myself when it mattered most, and in doing so, I had discovered a strength I never knew I possessed. Sometimes protecting yourself from someone you once loved is the hardest but most necessary decision you will ever make. It is not about revenge or bitterness, but about recognizing your own worth and refusing to be someone else's calculation. Have you ever had to protect yourself from someone's hidden agenda? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit subscribe and that like button to support more content like this. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that being prepared is not the same as being paranoid. And remember, while trust is essential in any relationship, being aware and taking care of yourself is never wrong. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you relationships built on honesty, not strategy.